My guest today is Tyler Sheff. Tyler is the founder of cashflowguys.com. He's a licensed real estate problem solver. He's an educator, he's an investor and syndicator, and the host of the podcast Cash Flow Guys. He's also a master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's Cash Flow 101 game. And with that, Tyler, welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. Or actually, I get all tongue-tied in my what it is. It's CREPN Radio. Tyler, welcome.
There you go. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm looking forward to talking with you. I know we were talking a little bit before we started recording about how warm your weather is down there and how cold my weather is up here. So, if you see any tears flowing in my eyes, just forgive me there. It's
Did you bring your Kleenex?
Oh, man, I got my sweater on and it's like, ish. But anyway, Tyler, before we jump into this a little bit, if you could share with the listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into real estate.
Well, it's funny. I started as a residential guy. I was one of those people that way back in year 2000, I thought that A, I would get my real estate license, and B, I would get rich overnight, right? I could just fix up and flip a few houses and everything would just work out dandy. Right?
Perfect.
So I'll spare you the boring details, but long story short, made a lot of money flipping houses. I used to think that commercial or multifamily or things like that were so far beyond me. I thought that was just for people with MBAs and all that other good stuff, and I didn't think that regular people could do that. So flipping houses, I paid an immense tax bill. I am fortunately not a victim of the housing crash. I got out by accident before I got out on purpose, but not because the house market was going to crash. I was just young and greedy. Paid a huge amount of capital gains tax back then. That's going back to circa 04, 05. Got out of real estate when things got a little weird. I was kind of a fair weather investor, so to speak. So things started getting hokey, and I had to work a little harder than I wanted to back at that age. So I went to work for the federal government, believe it or not, at sea, which was interesting. It was cool. And I've learned that if you are basically average, they will be shocked by your performance working for the government, and they will pay you a ridiculous amount of money, which is what happened. So I jumped out of the frying pan, so to speak, into the fire. And as regards to taxes, I was then a W-2 income earner, making six figures a year. The government's paying me in one pocket and taking it out the other. So
yeah.
had to get back into real estate, and that's how I wound up in the multifamily space.
Gotcha. And how long have you been back in the real estate game?
I got back in 2014. The straw was, I was up in the Bay of Fundy, and it was ridiculously rough. We're talking like 15, 18 foot seas. I'm out at sea as a merchant mariner working for National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. I'm out on deck. The wind's blowing, I don't remember how much, but it was ridiculous. It was like negative 14 outside. And every time water hit the ship and me, it turned to ice. And I thought, I am too old for this. I'm not going to survive this. So I needed to change. And it was then I'd taken some paid leave. That was my first tax strategy was, well, gee, dummy, all you got to do is take your overtime pay as comp time and go home and enjoy life for a little bit. So I took paid leave and said, if I can get back into real estate and replace my income, or at least get a feeling of it in that 6 months, I took 6 months paid leave, then I would stay home and do it. And that's exactly what I did.
Wow. What an exciting life. I've watched a few episodes of The Deadliest Catch, and I'm always amazed at how much of that's the music making it all exciting there. But definitely, I can only imagine being on 15-foot seas and frigid temperatures like that wouldn't exactly be a vacation spot.
No, definitely not.
No. So let's talk a little bit about. So now you're doing multifamily. You're still doing a lot of the residential. I know you've got the podcast. You do a lot of educating. Where are you at right now with all of your real estate?
Our focus in real estate right now, all of our holdings are multifamily. We prefer the small stuff, under 100 doors. We find that in that space, and this is my wife and I really, and a team of people that are working with us, we don't have a whole lot of competition because a lot of people are, you got the big guys chasing the big stuff. You got the little guys chasing the little stuff. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. So that works out well for us. Education kind of started by accident. Basically, when the podcast took off, people came to us and said, we want you to teach us what you do. That wasn't really our initial plan. We're like, look, man, we're just trying to invest in our own portfolio. Leave us alone. Come back later. And then we started the podcast educating people. It evolved into, we do have some courses, but, we're not gurus by any means, anything like that. But we put out some good information based on our own experiences, what we've learned and what we've learned not to do. Because I can tell you, I've made plenty of mistakes in that regard. So that's what we share with people and try to lower the amount of mistakes that people can make by showing them ours.
Well, and I think the voice of experience is always one that has it resonates with anybody who's been in the frying pan or has been facing a mistake and what do we do now there. So I think that's awesome. Are your investments or your holdings primarily near where you are located, or are you spread out, or do you have a strategy?
I'm in two markets, actually. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. I got a bunch of buildings up there, and I've got some down here in Florida on the Tampa Bay market. We got a mix of C and D class assets. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've got one that's gone from a C to an A. That's the one I'm at right now, actually. That's our best deal ever, so to speak. That's the one that's producing like crazy. They all do well, but this one does especially well. It was our first deal. Got this with none of our own money, which is awesome. So zero down, none of our own cash. And that's worked out quite well for us. And we've recently, last 2 years, deal flow, I'm sure you've experienced it as well. Deal flow it's light. People are shopping by cap rate. I'm seeing people down in Miami being okay with 2 cap.
Yeah.
Pro forma 2 cap. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That's pro forma?
Yeah.
What's actual look like?
Yeah. No,
so we got to start looking.
No, I was going to say that is, we talked a little bit before we started recording here, just with the market cycle and all the money chasing opportunities and I think the brokers and just the whole the marketplace, brokers, buyers, sellers are all kind of focused on getting the most they can and if you're selling, I get it. If you're trying to get the most out of your property, I get it.
Sure.
But I'm curious. One of the things we talked about was finding the problems. Not the properties. Is that a strategy that you guys employ when you're looking for properties? Is that something you guys use?
Yeah, for us, that's an everyday. Here's what I figured out. If I'm shopping, and I'm a licensed agent as well, so, and this is by no means disrespectful to agents by any means. I mean, I am one. But if we're looking at what's for sale, in other words, if we're shopping off the menu, well, then we're going to have a difficult time meeting our needs as far as investment criteria. So based on that, we had to look elsewhere. So we tried direct mail, right? And we're kind of a shotgun approach. You're hitting what you think is a distressed seller. Guys mismanaged his apartment building. The tenants are complaining, that type of thing. We had to drill down even deeper because what I found out is that my best deals were created when I was the only one that knew it was for sale. If I only was the only one, including the seller, that knew it was for sale, I could get a receptive audience and I could put together a deal that made sense for both the seller and I. And that's when we started laser focusing on problems. And the problems, just so you know, Darren, don't necessarily have to do with the property. It's also the problems with the owners. You think just because something's owned by an LLC, that everything's hunky-dory, and of course they're in some ivory tower in New York City, right?
Right.
Well, no.
Right.
Lots of new syndicators out there that overbought back in the day, and I'm here to help liberate them from the real estate.
Got it. So let's talk about what are some of the problems that you're finding that you're able to focus on.
Well, one of the big ones is people misjudging what the tenants need. In other words, let's say you go into a typical C-class asset and you find out, or C, or maybe even D-class asset, and the people will go in there, syndicators and new investor teams, they'll go in there and go, well, we're going to put really nice countertops, and we're going to upgrade all the appliances, and we're going to put stainless steel appliances, and we're going to do all these upgrades, right? Because the book that we read told us that that's going to get us the cap rate that we want, right? But we never bothered to really ask the tenants what they want, because the basketball court hasn't been repainted in 2 years, and the pool is kind of nasty, and people don't go there anymore, and half the furniture's broken, and they skip over that stuff. They skip over the things that they don't think are very important. They never bother to ask the tenants, hey, if you owned this place, what would you do? What would you like to see to make you never leave? And we did just that in our first properties in Tennessee. We knocked on doors and said, so we're going to plant some flowers out front and do this and do that. And the lady looked at me and she goes, son, have you lost your mind? I said, what do you mean? It was a D-class asset. And I was new to that sector. And I said, what that asset class? And I said, what are you talking about? I mean, we're going to make it beautiful. We're going to pressure wash and get the graffiti off the building. And she goes, I don't care about any of that. I'm worried about somebody kicking my door in the middle of the night. I want a security door. And I said, well, what is that? What would you pay to have that sense of security? What does that look like to you? She goes, I could easily pay $50 a month to have a security door, but I can't save up $300 all by myself. I started doing the math. I'm like, well, a security door is $300, right? $50 a month times 12 is $600. Oh, that's interesting. That means if I put a security door in for $300, I'd double my money in 12 months. Right. And it becomes forever. So you start doing things like that, and you're focusing on the needs of the tenant by simply asking them. Another building we had it was okay. It was inside. We were going to redo everything inside, and the people said most of the people that lived there had kids, and there was no good place for the kids to play. The parking lot was kind of up close to the building, and there was no yard nearby, and that was the downside of that building. Well, there happened to be a vacant lot next door, so we wound up buying the lot next door, and I got it for $100 from the city. It was a tax deed sale. Cut down all the garbage, cleaned it up nice, put a picnic or a swing set in there and some mulch. Now they got a playground. I raised the rent by $75 a door, and I had people standing in line. I have not had vacancy at that building since I did that, and that was 2 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
in that approach, you're focusing on the tenants, assuming that you've already acquired the property, or are you able to ask these questions before?
We try to ask while we're in due diligence. One of the requirements is that I get to talk to the tenants, that somebody from the team reaches out and talks to the tenants. And the first reason why we did that was basically to tell them, don't run. Everything's going to be fine. Don't run away. We're not going to do anything drastic in day one. We want to just get to know you. So what we've done recently is we'll throw a pizza party or something like that for people, kind of a meet and greet, like, hey, we're getting ready to take over. Just want to let you know that nothing's going to change. We're not going to raise your rents. All your leases are in effect. By law, we can't change anything. We wouldn't do that anyway. We want you to stay. So we mingle with the folks and talk to them and find out what makes them like being here and what makes them hate being here. If they were going to leave, why would they leave? And we address those issues. And what we found is that when you work within certain demographics, what the current tenants want and need, the people that are coming to move in want and need those same things. So it's kind of like having a built-in research,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think in so many cases people ignore, those that they've already got, in front of them, and then keep looking for the outsider, or the new meat, or whatever we want to say that is always more attractive because it's something you don't have, as opposed to just merely attending to those that you do have. That's a great idea there. So the tenant issues, tenant problems, that makes complete sense. That's an easy. I mean, that's so easy. That's as opposed to coming in and telling them how you're going to make it all, the world all, shiny, bright, and new. And them not appreciating or it not matching the property. Right. I mean, you mentioned the granite and the stainless steel and all that stuff, and if it's just not if the property doesn't measure up to that, and the tenants that are there don't recognize that as value, or aren't willing to pay for it, or you can't get that from the new, that's probably not a good fit. How else? Let me ask you this way. So recognizing the seller problems, let's talk about that a little bit. We talked about, you mentioned the LLC and the assumption that it's all, everything's hunky-dory for the owners of the properties. Are there any kind of tells that you have found that you look for when you're hunting for a problem?
I specifically look for properties owned by trusts and properties that are owned by LLCs. Here's why. That in the smaller multifamily space, every real estate guru and educator out there will tell you that you should be focused. Ignore those. You don't want to worry about anything that's owned by an LLC or owned by a trust, because those people know what they're doing. And I'm thinking to myself, I have several trusts. I buy everything in land trust. and I've got several LLCs, and I don't always know what I'm doing.
Right.
So I don't think that's good advice. And so I'll look for the obvious. It's right there in front of you. I hunt where nobody else is hunting. I'm kind of the guy right downtown going, "Hey, what about this place?" And everybody's like, "Oh, there was a building there? How
Right.
about that?"
Right.
So we're looking for that right away.
So what do you find that's wrong when you engage those owners of the properties?
Well, a lot of times they're worn out, especially when they self-manage. People are resistant to spend. Landlords have this mindset thing about, well, I can do this myself, or my family's been doing this forever. When I see a family-run type business, quote unquote, I know that somebody in that family's tuckered out. Somebody is just sick and tired of dealing with this thing. So that constitutes a problem. When they get tired, they start doing a bad job. They start cutting corners. The tenants start to notice. And one of the things that we will do is I've got VAs, that English-speaking VAs over in the Philippines that go on tenant websites and chats and things like that on Facebook, watching for similarities in certain areas. Like when you see, for example, apartment building in Tampa, there's a big development, and several tenants were talking about this property as being a problem property. We've got one down not too far from us right now that we got our eye on. A lot of complaints coming from the tenants out in forums and public chats. You can search for things like that. So when we identify those issues, now we'll reach out to the owner and say, hey, just let you know, if you ever think about selling, we're looking for great opportunities in this area. Please let us know. And just as simple as that. Just a simple planting the seed.
It's so funny. I don't know if I shared with you. By day, I'm an insurance broker and focus on working with real estate investors and apartment owners and anything commercial property. But I can share with you the experience I've had here recently is I've had underwriters looking at those same chats and forums.
Yeah. Exactly.
And basically saying that we're not interested in insuring that property based on the comments in the Yelp, and sometimes they may be valid, sometimes they may not necessarily be, or at least maybe the issue's been resolved or whatever it was, kind of thing. But I found it was interesting that now I'm not only am I having to engage the property owner on the physical characteristics and all the management questions. Now I've got to go on this management reputation thing and say, the underwriter was noticing that on this website that there's quite a few comments about this. How are you handling that kind of thing? So it's definitely something that's the new world there as far as opportunity for the tenants to vent and the rest of the world to observe.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you, as an insurance guy, you're not alone there because the lenders are in the same boat. Recently, I was representing some buyers as an agent, and it was about an 8, 10, 12 unit building. The banker, this is a small local bank, a little regional bank, actually got in the car before we even did an application or due diligence on this thing. Got in his car, drove by it, and said, "No, we're not going to loan money on this because there's a couch in the backyard." Like, what? Yeah, that's too much risk for us. It's not something that we want to mess with. I'm going, you got to be kidding me. Really?
Yeah.
Oh. So.
Well, and I think that since the crash, I think, and at least with the insurance companies, they've certainly tightened up their underwriting criteria. I think the same could be said for the lenders. Whereas before the crash, it was kind of like the joke was kind of if you could fog a mirror kind of thing, you could get 125% loan to value kind of thing.
Right.
And everybody was just busy collecting fees rather than worrying about holding the paper kind of thing.
That's correct.
And so I think now that there's clearly a realization of some skin in the game, or at least some sort of a due diligence on the insurance and, like I said, the banks as well. So I like that strategy though from a standpoint of the websites that are where the tenants are kind of making noise that's observable, that's probably been a pain for the owner and management to deal with, and certainly I'm guessing that's kind of a clue as to other things that are. That's not just like you've got a tenant with no job that's sitting at home, online complaining. There's usually where there's smoke, there's fire, if you will.
Exactly.
So I'm assuming then you can find or assume that there's, whether it be deferred maintenance or just, like you said, an exhausted owner from that. That's a good one. Are you? Are there other things that you look for? I mean, you mentioned the trust, and I'm assuming, or maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What do you in a trust? Do you find anything that's unique, different? Is there maybe it's been inherited, or it's other tells that you see?
I can usually find that the person. So first thing I look for in a trust is I want the trust named in somebody's name because that tells me the attorney they didn't invest a whole lot of time picking a very good attorney to protect their assets. First of all, because the whole idea of a trust is anonymity.
Right.
And if it's got your name on it, it's no longer anonymous. So it's
Right.
like, okay, well, that guy probably needs a little more assistance. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to him first. Until you get one that's like the Brown Fence Trust, then okay, that guy's probably a little more savvy. So I'll reach out to Tom Smith from the Tom Smith Trust, who says that it's not my property, it's not mine, right? Whatever, go ahead. Who cares? So if I was to hand you a couple $100,000, would it then be your property?
Yeah.
Who's the check payable to?
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll reach out to the people that I can see have cut corners, because when they've cut corners, they've always, and this is without a shadow of a doubt, they always have management issues. When I see them cut corners in any part of how they do business, deferred maintenance, naming their trust incorrectly, looking at, we got VAs that do a search of their LLCs, and if we see they were popped for not reinstating, in other words, they got administratively canceled their LLC, that tells me that nobody's really paying attention to the details, right? There's no details in the mix. That tells me I can probably come across the train wreck in due diligence. And that's where when you talk about buying problems, I want the stuff that the banks are going to say, oh, no, thank you, and just push it back across the table. That means I don't have any competition because there's not a lot of people out there that are paying with real cash. I mean, actual cash.
Right.
Everybody's borrowing from somebody or somewhere, and somebody else is making a decision. They're getting permission from somebody else. You see, I don't have to do that, which puts me in a distinct advantage. So I don't really have a lot of competition when I'm playing in that market.
Got it. You've identified a problem. You've got a problem as far as other competitors wouldn't be able to, solve the problem. Does that lend itself to some unique opportunities on the purchase? Are you able to? Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I never assume, and this is something that held me back for many years. Is I always thought I knew what somebody else wanted. Well, they're never going to take that offer, or they would never accept terms because they just said they need $50,000 cash, and what I'm going to offer them, it doesn't equate to that. And what I've realized is that I really am not good at reading minds. I'm terrible at it because reading minds is guessing. So I stopped guessing and I started asking. Mr. Jones, Darren, is there any way that you wouldn't consider doing this? Okay, Mr. Jones, well, don't tell me what you won't do. Tell me what you will do. I start having conversations like that. I learned that from one of my mentors, Larry Harbold, who has since become a partner of mine. He's a co-educator with me. But by applying that, by talking to people, and for me, I've got to be in with the seller. If there's an agent involved, that's cool. I'm an agent too. But I will forego my fee, and I will go talk directly to the listing agent, ask the listing agent so that I can sit down with the seller and the listing agent. Let's work out a deal. The difference is that if the seller is even remotely motivated, I can almost always walk out with a contract. Almost always. So the closing ratios are huge when I can get face-to-face.
No, I was talking with somebody else the other day, and similar kind of strategy is the kind of a multiple options, but kind of more of this connection of kind of really understand what it is that the sellers, what do they want, kind of like what
Right.
you were saying, is trying to find out what do they need to make this transaction happen, as opposed to the like the listing agents typically are more interested in, nope, here's the price, here's the cash, that's what we're looking for, we're not going to carry anything, nothing to gum up the works, let's get this baby done, we want a clean sale.
Exactly.
And assuming again with the advantage you've got, recognizing you've got a problem, they're going to have that problem regardless of who they're talking with.
Right.
And so that's something they're going to have to overcome. Can you provide like an example of one that you've recent problem that you've solved and identified and solved?
This is the great one, and it talks about solving problems as well. There was an agent in the mix, right? And the agent essentially was just what you'd said. We're not going to do that. The seller's not going to take terms. They want all cash, and they have to close quickly. And no, you can't talk to them, and on and on and on. So okay, that's fine. Completely shut me down. I waited a few days. It's still sitting on the market. I reached out to the agent again. And I said, "Here's the thing. I've been looking at this property, and I want you to crush it with this property. I want you to do really well. So here's what I'm going to do. Is it true that if I offered you, say, 8% commission, that would be more than what you're making now?" And the agent was like, "Well, yeah. Okay, so let's assume I can pay you an 8% fee." And we both know I'm an agent as well. I'm not going to take a fee. I'm going to pay you 8% to represent me in this transaction or to be a transaction broker. And I got quiet. They said, "Well, what can I do for you then?" I said, "Well, we can sit down and have a conversation with the seller." Well, the seller happened to be out of state. They're in Arizona somewhere. "Well, we could have a phone conversation. I would like to have the opportunity to present my offer in your presence, of course. I am willing to pay 100% of your fee myself so that the seller won't have to be burdened with that decision. We'll discuss that with them when we get on the phone. And I will make it, and I want to make an offer that sometimes my offers, I got to ask a lot of questions, and I don't want to waste your time going back and forth, because I respect your time. So if the three of us could have a conversation, I'm confident we could put something together that would yield you a higher commission than what you're willing to earn already and get the deal done quickly. And you really don't have to do a thing if you choose not to. If that could accomplish something like that, would that make sense to you?" And of course they say, "Well, heck yeah." So we did. I got on the phone with the seller. I got the purchase price reduced by 50%. It was it was a home run deal. It turned out to be a probate situation. It was his sister's property. She died. It was a small multifamily setup. The sister died, and there were some legal challenges. The listing agent hadn't even done the homework to see if the probate was properly finalized. So there was a lot of missing things. She wouldn't have got it sold anyway. So she was tickled pink. I paid her an above board fee. Big deal. I got a 50% discount off of full value on the property. And it's an absolute cash cow. So win-win. Everybody wins, right? The agent got more than what she was originally ever going to get. And she had me to do all the work, my team to do all the work. The seller got what they wouldn't have normally gotten. So everybody won.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you find that seller carrybacks are an option you find in problem properties that people are receptive to?
I find them both in problem properties and pretty ones. Here's why. What I've discovered and what I finally got beat into my head, mainly from my mentor, Larry Harbold, is that people don't really want cash. They want what cash will do for them. So in other words, some people say, "I want 500,000 for my strip mall or 1 million for my strip mall." Okay. So of that 1 million, how much are you going to give to the bank when we close so that I can get the deed? Well, 900,000. Okay. So realistically, you want $100,000 less fees. Correct. Okay. Now we can negotiate on 100,000. I've been doing this a long time, and I've found that the smaller the number you can negotiate on, the easier the negotiation is. If you and I are negotiating over $20, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time and effort over $20, are we?
No.
But if we're talking about $1 million, we're going to go on for months. Right. We're going to get attorneys involved and CPAs, and we're just going to have a grand old time and make everybody on our team rich
right.
to get to the
Before
common denominator.
You're negotiating over the $20, right?
So, right, exactly.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And again, I think the ability to talk directly with the party as opposed to going through the contract back and forth, and I've bought properties direct. I've bought them through brokers. I think the simplest ones I've ever done have been basically on almost a note card with here's the price, here's the down, here's the terms, good, sign, and off to the races we go. But and again, I think that the beauty of what your approach here is that they have a problem, and you're the solution, and the fact that the problem's going to go away. And now we're talking about how to resolve the money part of it, but the problem's going to go away. then they're going to have to face that problem regardless, if it's with you or with somebody else, and you've made it go away. That's huge.
And doing that, just one thing I want to add is that in some cases, especially when it comes to taxation, I've had situations where sellers have accepted my offer, which is significantly lower because I offered them terms and I offered them something that helped them more. Like they didn't realize that when they sold their $1 million property, that Uncle Sam was going to be standing there with his hand out going, payday, thank you very much. Yeah. And when we can mitigate that for them and spread that out over 10 years, nobody else mentioned that. So everybody else becomes a white noise and they focus on us, which is perfect.
Right. No, I think that is, like you said before, they don't necessarily want the cash. They want what the cash will do for them.
Absolutely.
And that's, definitely like a bite-sized, simple way to think of it, and something to even introduce with the seller that, just to remind them that unless they've got something they're going to go buy with that money, the money's going to sit in the bank. It's going to earn, close to 1, or I guess maybe interest rates are coming up a little bit, but still nothing like what you could offer to pay, if they were willing to take terms. And they can have the cash flow. They don't have the tax problem, and the problem that you've identified will be gone.
Absolutely. And, one of the best things with that is we can say, listen, if you put your money in the bank, what backing does it have? You take cash, you take $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, whatever it is, you put it in the bank. What do you have? You have insurance through the FDIC. Okay. So basically, it's backed by the full power and the good credit of the U.S. government. As you've been watching the Journal anytime soon, in the last 20 years, we're broke as a country. So there's your guarantee. You're coveting something that's paper, it's cotton and whatnot, that has no backing because, back in the 70s, remember Nixon took us off the gold standard? So our money has no backing. It's just a perceived value. Yeah. I can give you a return, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, based on the real estate that you already know is valuable because it generates income. The U.S. dollar can't do that.
Right. No, that's awesome. Let me ask you this: do you have any? I'm trying to think. So we had a kind of a stall there. We've talked about the tenants. We've talked about the kind of the trust and the LLCs. Any other identifiable problems that you've run across that you find treasures in?
People not really understanding how to manage the property or the managers themselves. I've had a lot of situations like that where you get newbie investors. They go online and they find some turnkey opportunity, and the failure rate on turnkey properties, I researched it recently. It's staggering because these are people that are unskilled, and they will come in and buy these turnkey properties. These management companies, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are managing bulk numbers of properties, so they're not very sophisticated people that are investing. This is why, when you go to a strip mall or something like that, or a commercial asset, office space, usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been my experience that most of those buyers and sellers are usually a little more savvy. They're stepping outside of the usual, the norm. They're stepping outside of the Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad world, right? Right. So they're usually a little more sophisticated. Therefore, you don't have these issues. But when you're dealing in the multifamily space, especially in the smaller stuff, the under 10 doors, you're going to find a lot of unsophisticated sellers. And sometimes just driving by, you can see the writing on the wall. Like, let's say if you got a 10-unit building that's got 4 dumpsters sitting out front. Well, there's a problem because somebody's not paying attention that they're overpaying for dumpsters because you don't need 4 for a building that size. Calling the water department, and this is something we discovered recently. We called the water department in Tampa, got a list of properties that use above average amounts of water based on a residential neighborhood, right? That all that data you can find online, things like that. In due diligence, we found a property that the water bill was insane. It was like, I don't know, $900 a month for 4 units for a water bill.
Wow.
So when I did the pro forma and I underwrote the deal, I sat down with the seller. Again, we're direct to the seller, right? And I said, this water bill is ridiculous. I mean, They're like, yeah. I'm like, that's going to almost bankrupt me having to pay that every month. But I suppose what I didn't mention is that I'm going to call the city and get a leak detector out there and to figure out what's going on. And we reduced the water bill down to like, I don't know, $200 a month or something rather. Huge difference. So we just found $700 a month. I mean, that's huge.
No, I love that. Finding the problem. That's pretty clever there with the identifying or contacting the water department there. I know I've had a few plumbing leaks in my life, and it certainly shocks you when you see the bill go from X to 4X or whatever. It's like, oh my God, and I know the other thing that I don't know if you've had any experience with, and I don't know if they would do this, but I know when I've identified the problem and rectified it, they've recognized they've gone back to a certain point in time. And I mean, if it's been going on for years, probably wouldn't be so agreeable, but at least and it depends on the municipality. I've had them where they'll acknowledge that the water didn't go down the sewer, so they'll bring the sewer back to what it was, pre-bill or whatever kind of thing. But that can be a big credit that way too. So
Absolutely.
That's huge. So, I want to ask you a little bit about the Robert Kiyosaki. I forget what the.
Cash Flow 101.
Yeah. Sorry, hang on one second. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. The Robert Kiyosaki Cash Flow 101. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, for me, that game literally changed my life. I hired a mentor that insisted that I play that game, first of all. And I reluctantly did. My wife and I sat down. I was kind of grumbling about, I'm too old to play games. I just want to make money, right? And as I started playing the game, I had all kinds of light bulbs going off. And so what we started in our market was we started playing the game with other people. In other words, we'd go to coffee houses and restaurants and things like that, and we'd get people up from Meetup and from the internet to come out there and meet us and play the game. So I turned it into a teaching tool. I used the principles of the game to help people get in the right mindset of getting financially free. We live in a society where if we can finance it or if it'll fit on a credit card, we can obviously afford it. We'll figure out how to pay for it later. So we started teaching people in our community for free how to get financially free. And it kind of went crazy. I mean, it got to the point to where we were having 70 people show up.
Wow.
I ran out of places to hold it. The restaurants are like, dude, you got to pay us. So I had to start charging $20 a head, basically, just to eliminate a lot of the cheapos that I knew were just coming to suck up the free information. And it worked famously. So I got a good core group of people, like 20, 30 people, that come every time we do these. And we have a great time. And we talk about the different ways to structure passive income opportunities, whether it be, I don't know, buying a jet ski and selling to somebody else on terms, or flipping furniture, or whatever you can do to get yourself financially free and get out of debt.
No, that's awesome. I don't think I've ever played the game. I've read a number of his books. Cash Flow Quadrant, I think, was the last one I read, which I thought was awesome. But that's all of his stuff that I've read and heard, and it's solid, and it gets people focused on just really what the power of money and leverage, good leverage, as opposed to consumer leverage kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And that's awesome. I'm looking at kind of a list of the questions I had kind of sketched out before we got together here. And I'm wondering if there's one thing that you would encourage our listeners to do to help them grow their real estate portfolio.
I would, for me, what we just talked about, the Cash Flow 101 game. Here's the thing. If you think you can build a portfolio sitting behind a computer hiding from other people, it's not going to work. Real estate is a team sport. It is. There's no way possible you'll be able to achieve financial freedom by yourself. It's just not possible. You need somebody. You need somebody to bring you opportunities, or somebody to bring you money, or something. You're going to need many different things, many factors to grow your portfolio. You can't do this one house at a time unless you're 20. But I'm not 20, so I couldn't do that. I had to go the bigger way. So get out there, grab it. For $60 on Amazon, you can buy a Cash Flow 101 board game. Go set it at a coffee shop and start playing it with other people. Number one, it's going to teach you how to interact with other people, because we all need help with that in the days of Facebook and cell phones, right?
Right.
And my cash flow game has resulted in me raising well into the millions of dollars of capital from people coming to my event, And what I've discovered is there are more people out there with money to invest than there are deals to invest it in. And that's a fact. So if you want an unlimited amount of money, go play Cash Flow 101. That's simple.
Got it. You mentioned you had 70 people playing the game. I'm assuming you have a couple of boards there. How many pieces are there in the?
Yeah, I got a pile of them now. Okay. I got 15 boards.
Okay.
Because we've put on big events. I drove to Orlando and a local market and put on big events for a women investors group and whatnot. So yeah, we've done big scale events.
Oh, that's awesome. What's a great idea too, like you said, though, that it is a team sport and getting people involved and engaging in the conversation and finding like-minded people. That's a great little way to do that. So,
absolutely.
Cool. Well, hey, Tyler, before we wrap this up, what's the best way for our listeners to find out more, get in touch, or follow you on social media?
The best way for me is to go to my website at cashflowguys.com, cashflowguys.com. My links to my YouTube channel is there. I get all kinds of free information. My podcast is there, articles, you name it. It's all right there, cashflowguys.com.
Got it. Tyler, I've enjoyed our time, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. And for our listeners, if you like the show, share the show with someone you know so they can hear Tyler's story and how they can grow their real estate portfolio. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.